Commander Vex Harrell stood 7 feet tall, possessed 16 different ways to kill with his bare claws, and had single-handedly conquered 12 star systems. He was also currently getting his ass kicked by a houseplant. Well, technically it wasn't the houseplant doing the kicking. That honor belonged to Mildred Kowalski, a 63-year-old human female who ran something called a yoga class, and had just informed him that his warrior stance was absolutely dreadful, dear. "Your chakras are completely misaligned," she declared, adjusting his posture with the casual confidence of someone who had faced down 3 divorces and a broken garbage disposal. "How do you expect to achieve inner peace while standing like a constipated flamingo?" Vex Harrell, supreme battle champion of the Krillian Empire, terror of the Andromeda Spiral, and holder of the Golden Claw of Infinite Destruction, blinked slowly. His mission briefing had been quite specific: infiltrate human society, assess their combat capabilities, and report back on their military weaknesses. Nowhere in those orders had anyone mentioned chakras. The whole thing had started 3 weeks ago, when High Command decided that direct observation was needed. The humans had been making quite a noise in their little corner of the galaxy, sending out radio signals that roughly translated to "We're here and we're weird," with alarming frequency. Standard protocol demanded a reconnaissance mission, and Vex Harrell had volunteered because, frankly, how dangerous could a species be that hadn't even figured out faster-than-light travel yet? The answer, as it turned out, was very. "Breathe through your nose, not your mouth," Mildred commanded, whacking his shin with what humans apparently called a yoga block. "Iku, you're panting like my ex-husband after climbing the stairs." Vex Harrell tried to comply, but breathing through his nose while maintaining what Mildred called proper alignment required a level of multitasking that his military training hadn't covered. Back home, combat was straightforward: identify enemy, apply overwhelming force, collect victory trophy. Here, humans seemed to derive pleasure from deliberately making themselves uncomfortable and calling it wellness. The truly disturbing part wasn't the physical contortions. No, what kept Vex Harrell awake at night in his rented studio apartment was the gradual realization that this wasn't training for anything. Humans did this for fun. He'd initially assumed the yoga class was some form of military preparation. The positions certainly looked like combat stances, and Mildred's instructions were delivered with the authority of a drill sergeant. But when he'd asked about the tactical applications of downward-facing dog, she'd given him a look that suggested he might be suffering from some form of brain damage. "Tactical applications?" she'd laughed, a sound that somehow managed to be both warm and terrifying. "Honey, the only thing this is tactical for is preventing lower back pain." That had been Vex Harrell's first real glimpse into the abyss of human casual impossibility. They performed feats of physical coordination that would challenge a trained Krillian warrior, and they did it to prevent minor discomfort. His second encounter with human absurdity had come when he'd signed up for what he assumed was a combat sport called CrossFit. The name alone suggested military applications, and the advertisements featured humans engaged in what appeared to be intensive battle preparation. Vex Harrell had arrived expecting to finally see some proper warrior training. Instead, he'd found himself face to face with Derek Hammerstein, a 28-year-old insurance adjuster who could apparently deadlift twice his own body weight just because it makes me feel good about myself. "What the hell is wrong with your form?" Derek had bellowed during Vex Harrell's first attempt at something called a burpee. "Are you trying to injure yourself, or are you just naturally this bad at everything?" Vex Harrell, who had once fought off an entire battalion of Zephonian death commandos with nothing but a broken plasma rifle and sheer determination, found himself utterly humiliated by a movement that involved repeatedly throwing oneself at the ground and hoping to bounce back up in a way that didn't look completely ridiculous. But Derek wasn't finished. "And another thing," He continued, clearly warming to his subject. Your breathing is all wrong. You're supposed to exhale on the exertion, not hold your breath like you're about to pass out. What kind of half-assed training did you have before this? The honest answer was 17 years of the most elite military conditioning the Krillian Empire could provide. But something told Vex Harrell that Derek wouldn't be impressed. The truly mind-bending moment had come when Derek casually mentioned that he did this 3 times a week, just to stay in shape for sitting at a desk all day. Just to stay in shape for sitting. Vex Harrell had excused himself to the bathroom and spent 10 minutes staring at his reflection, wondering if he'd somehow stumbled into an alternate dimension where the laws of logic had been suspended. Back on Krylos, their finest warriors trained with religious dedication to achieve peak physical condition. Here, humans casually maintained that same level of fitness as a hobby, specifically to counteract the effects of their completely sedentary lifestyles. The situation had only gotten worse when he'd decided to test human endurance capabilities by participating in what seemed like a simple community event, a local marathon. Surely, he'd reasoned, a 26-mile run would separate the true warriors from the casual fitness enthusiasts. He'd been wrong. So terribly wrong. The starting line had been crowded with humans of every conceivable age and physical condition. There was Gertrude Henderson, 74 years old, and wearing a T-shirt that read, "If you're not sweating, you're not trying." There was Randolph Fitzgerald, a software developer who looked like he lived exclusively on energy drinks and regret. There was even a group of humans dressed as superheroes, apparently running the entire distance in costume for no reason other than it seemed like fun. Vex Harrell had positioned himself strategically near the front, confident that his superior Krillian physiology would give him an insurmountable advantage. The starting gun fired, and he surged forward with the explosive power that had once carried him across the killing fields of Proxima Beta. For the first 5 miles, everything went according to plan. He maintained a steady lead, his enhanced metabolism efficiently processing oxygen while his competitors fell behind. By mile 10, he was feeling pleased with himself. By mile 15, he was starting to think this whole human assessment mission might be easier than expected. By mile 20, Gertrude Henderson jogged past him. "Looking a little winded there, sweetie," she called over her shoulder, somehow managing to sound both encouraging and vaguely condescending. "Remember to pace yourself. This isn't a sprint." Vex Harrell tried to respond, but all that came out was a sound like a deflating balloon. His superior Krillian physiology, it seemed, was not designed for prolonged endurance activities. His species had evolved for short, intense bursts of violence, not the kind of sustained, methodical punishment that humans apparently inflicted on themselves for entertainment. The finish line had been a blur of exhaustion and existential horror. Vex Harrell crossed it in what he later learned was a respectable time of 4 hours and 12 minutes, placing him somewhere in the middle of the pack. Gertrude had finished 47 minutes earlier and was currently leading a post-race stretching session while simultaneously planning her next marathon. "Not bad for a first-timer," she'd said, patting his shoulder with the casual strength of someone who had been casually achieving the impossible for 7 decades. "You'll get the hang of it. The trick is to build up your base slowly. I've been doing this for 30 years now, and I'm still learning new things about my body every race." The phrase, "still learning new things about my body," delivered by a septuagenarian who had just outpaced an elite alien warrior, hung in the air like a death sentence. That night, Vex Harrell had sat in his apartment, staring at his official mission communicator and trying to figure out how to explain what he'd discovered. How do you tell your commanding officers that the species you're supposed to assess has achieved a level of casual physical capability that makes your elite military training look like a warm-up exercise? He'd started typing his report 17 times and deleted it 17 times. Each attempt sounded increasingly insane. The humans appear to possess supernatural endurance capabilities, which they use primarily for recreational purposes. Delete. Human civilians regularly perform feats of strength and coordination that would challenge our best soldiers, apparently as a form of stress relief. Delete. I believe the humans may actually be some form of advanced war machine disguised as a peaceful species. They have somehow weaponized their own leisure time. Delete. Finally, in desperation, he'd composed a simple message. Require additional reconnaissance time. Human capabilities, complex. Will report soon. The response had come back within hours. Understood. Sending backup. Vexaharal had felt a wave of relief. Finally, he wouldn't be alone in this madhouse. Surely a full reconnaissance team would be able to make sense of what he'd been experiencing. 3 days later, the backup arrived in the form of Captain Tisisandra, a decorated Special Forces officer known throughout the Empire for her analytical precision and unshakable composure. She materialized in his apartment with the confident bearing of someone who had never encountered a problem that couldn't be solved with proper planning and overwhelming force. "Report," she demanded, setting down a standard military field pack and surveying the human furniture with obvious distaste. Vexharal tried to explain. He really did. But how do you convey the essential wrongness of a species that treats physical torment as a hobby? How do you describe the casual way humans discuss activities that would hospitalize a Krillian warrior? "They exercise," he said finally, "for pleasure." Thisandra blinked. "Clarify." "They deliberately stress their bodies to the point of exhaustion, not as preparation for combat or survival, but because they enjoy it." "That seems unlikely." Would you like me to demonstrate?" An hour later, Captain Thisandra, terror of the Galactic Rim and recipient of the Purple Star for tactical excellence, was lying face down on a yoga mat while Mildred explained the finer points of the Cobra pose. "Your form is terrible," Mildred declared with characteristic directness. "Are you even trying to engage your core? And what's with that breathing pattern? You sound like a broken air conditioner." Thisandra, who had endured interrogation by the dreaded pain priests of Vega without breaking, whimpered softly into the mat. "I don't understand," she whispered to Vexharal during what Mildred called a water break. "Why do they do this to themselves? I've been asking myself the same question for weeks. And you said they do this? Recreationally? Multiple times per week, sometimes daily." Thisandra stared at the collection of humans chatting casually while preparing for the next round of voluntary physical punishment. "We may need more backup." The additional support arrived in waves over the following days. Lieutenant Grixnal, the Empire's foremost expert in enemy psychology. Commander Zixmoth, renowned for his ability to analyze alien combat doctrines. Even senior tactical analyst Vorthok, whose strategic assessments had been used to conquer half the known galaxy. One by one, they fell to the casual impossibility of human existence. Grixnal lasted exactly 37 minutes in something called a spin class before requesting emergency extraction. "They're pedaling bicycles that don't go anywhere," he'd reported in obvious distress. "On purpose. And they seemed to be enjoying it." The instructor kept shouting things like "feel the burn" and "push through the pain," as if suffering was some kind of achievement. The psychological implications had shattered Grixnal's carefully constructed understanding of rational behavior. "They've created artificial challenges," he'd continued, his voice rising to near panic. "They could simply not pedal the stationary bicycle, but instead they choose to pedal it very fast, while someone shouts motivational torture at them, and they pay money for this privilege." Commander Zixmoth had attempted to analyze human combat doctrine by observing a local martial arts tournament, only to discover that the humans had weaponized dancing. "They call it capoeira," he'd explained, his voice hollow with shock. "They flip and spin and somehow manage to fight without ever appearing to fight. It's like they've turned combat into an art form. then turned the art form back into combat, then decided it wasn't complicated enough, so they added music. The demonstration he'd witnessed had featured two humans engaging in what appeared to be a deadly serious attempt to kick each other's heads off, but they were doing it to a rhythm, with smiles on their faces, and somehow managing to make it look like they were having a dance party instead of a death match. And when I asked about the strategic applications, Zixmoth had continued, they told me it was good exercise and fun for the whole family. The whole family. They're teaching their children combat techniques disguised as recreational dancing. Senior tactical analyst Vorthuk had taken a more methodical approach, attempting to understand human military thinking by observing their team sports. His final report had been a single line: request immediate reassignment to any other galaxy, preferably one without humans. When pressed for details, Vorthuk had explained that he'd attended something called a rugby match, which appeared to be a military simulation involving two armies attempting to advance across a battlefield while engaging in hand-to-hand combat. The strategic implications had seemed promising until he'd realized that the participants were volunteers who had other jobs, and that the entire conflict was staged for the entertainment of spectators who cheered for their preferred army. "They've turned warfare into entertainment," he'd reported, "but that's not the worst part. The worst part is that the entertainment is so realistic that actual warriors could learn tactical applications from watching it. They've accidentally created a training system that's more effective than most military academies, and they think it's just a game." The breaking point had come when the local community college had offered a beginning self-defense course, and Vex Harrell had volunteered his entire team for what he assumed would finally be some legitimate military training. The instructor was a cheerful woman named Debbie Thornfield, who worked as a librarian during the day and taught self-defense because everyone should know how to protect themselves. She was approximately 5 feet tall, weighed maybe 110 pounds, and possessed the kind of sunny disposition that suggested she'd never encountered a problem that couldn't be solved with proper organization and herbal tea. She also, as it turned out, could kill a person in at least 47 different ways, most of which involved repurposing everyday objects. The key to effective self-defense, Debbie explained, while demonstrating a technique that somehow turned a rolled-up magazine into a weapon of terrifying efficiency, is understanding that anything can be dangerous if you know how to use it properly. Your keys, your purse, even a simple pencil can become a tool for protection in the right hands. Vex Harrell watched in fascination as this delicate human female systematically dismantled the combat assumptions of an entire alien reconnaissance team. Thais Andra tapped out during a demonstration of basic wrist control techniques. Grixenol requested a medical timeout after Debbie showed him 17 different ways to escape from a bear hug. Commander Zixmoth simply stared at the wall and muttered something about recreational lethality. But it was Debbie's casual comment at the end of the class that truly broke them. "Remember, this is just the basics. Next week we'll start covering the fun stuff." The fun stuff. She considered what they'd just experienced to be preparatory material for the fun stuff. "Now, I know some of you might be thinking that this all seems a bit intense," Debbie had continued, apparently oblivious to the fact that she'd just reduced a team of elite alien warriors to whimpering masses of self-doubt. "But self-defense isn't about being aggressive or violent. It's about being prepared. You never know when you might need these skills, so it's better to have them and not need them than to need them and not have them." The casual way she discussed potentially lethal combat techniques as if they were basic life skills like knowing how to change a tire or balance a checkbook was perhaps the most disturbing thing Vex Harrell had encountered in his entire military career. That night, Vex Harrell called an emergency meeting in his apartment. His entire team sat in stunned silence, each processing their own particular flavor of existential crisis. "I think," said Thysandra slowly, "we may have severely underestimated this species. Underestimated? Grixnell laughed, a sound devoid of humor. They've turned their entire existence into an endless series of casual impossibilities. They torture themselves for entertainment. They've weaponized their hobbies. They treat activities that would challenge our finest warriors as beginner-level recreation. The question, said Commander Zixmoth, is what do we do about it? Vex Harrell stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the human city beyond. Somewhere out there, Gertrude Henderson was probably planning her next marathon. Derek Hammerstein was likely scheduling his evening CrossFit session. Mildred Kowalski was undoubtedly preparing new and creative ways to torture people in the name of wellness. And Debbie Thornfield was probably organizing her lesson plans for next week's fun stuff, and none of them had the slightest idea that they were being observed by a team of alien military specialists who had concluded that humans might be the most casually dangerous species in the known galaxy. "We report back," Vex Harrell said finally, "and we recommend immediate diplomatic contact." Diplomatic contact? Thisandra seemed surprised. "Think about it," Vex Harrell explained. "If this is what humans do for fun, what do you think they're capable of when they're actually trying to hurt someone?" The silence that followed that question was the kind of silence that accompanies truly profound realizations. Senior tactical analyst Vorthuk cleared his throat. "There's something else," he said quietly, "something I noticed during my observations of their recreational combat simulations." "What?" "They have rules, extensive, detailed rules that govern every aspect of their mock warfare. Rules about what you can and cannot do, when you can and cannot do it, and severe penalties for breaking those rules. So these rules exist specifically to prevent serious injury or death during their recreational combat. They've created elaborate systems to make their entertainment version of warfare safer than actual warfare. The implications hung in the air like a toxic cloud. "You're saying," Thisandra said slowly, "that they've made their games more civilized than our actual military campaigns." "I'm saying," Vorthuk replied, "that they've accidentally created a training system that teaches all the tactical elements of combat while simultaneously teaching restraint, fair play, and respect for opponents. They're not just physically superior to us, they're morally superior to us." 3 days later, High Command received a report unlike anything in the Empire's military archives. It was detailed, comprehensive, and absolutely terrifying in its implications. The recommendation was unanimous: immediate peaceful contact with the human species, preferably accompanied by very polite requests for friendly relations and possibly some tips on physical fitness. The response came back within hours. "Report rejected, readings implausible, sending full battle assessment team." Vex Harrell read the message twice, then looked at his team. "How long do you think it'll take them to figure it out?" "About 30 seconds after they meet Mildred," Thisandra replied. She was wrong. It took 47 seconds, but only because the battle assessment team leader had to be revived twice during his first yoga class. The second report was even more emphatic than the first, and it included detailed physiological scans proving that humans routinely subjected themselves to stress levels that would be considered torture by galactic standards. The recommendation was upgraded to urgent diplomatic contact, with a side note suggesting that anyone assigned to human-related missions should probably update their insurance policies first. This time, High Command took notice. Ambassador Krexthul arrived on Earth 3 weeks later with a full diplomatic entourage and a mandate to establish formal relations with humanity. He was a seasoned professional with decades of experience in first contact protocols, and he'd reviewed all available intelligence on human capabilities and cultural practices. None of which prepared him for his first meeting with the mayor of Portland, Oregon, a cheerful man named Bob Hendricks, who greeted the alien ambassador by asking if he'd like to join the city's weekend hiking group. "Hiking?" Ambassador Krexthul inquired, his universal translator struggling with the casual way humans discussed activities that appeared to involve deliberately getting lost in wilderness areas. "Oh, it's great exercise," Bob replied enthusiastically. "We usually do about 15 miles through the mountains. Beautiful scenery, fresh air, and it's a fantastic way to stay in shape. You look like you could use some cardio work, if you don't mind me saying so." Ambassador Krexthul, who had spent the better part of 2 centuries perfecting the art of interspecies diplomacy, found himself completely unprepared for a species that opened diplomatic relations by critiquing his cardiovascular fitness. 15 miles, he managed. Through mountains. "Well, technically they're more like big hills," Bob clarified. "But don't worry if you can't keep up. We've got people of all fitness levels in the group. Eleanor's 82, and she does just fine. Of course, she used to run ultramarathons, but still, the phrase "used to run ultramarathons" hung in the air like a death sentence. Ambassador Krexthul made a mental note to review the definition of ultramarathon and immediately regretted it. "And what exactly," he asked carefully, "is an ultramarathon?" "Oh, that's any race longer than a regular marathon. Eleanor's personal best was a 100-miler through the desert. Took her about 22 hours, but she finished. Tough as nails, that woman." Ambassador Krexthul stared at Bob with the expression of someone who had just been informed that gravity was optional on Tuesdays. "She ran 100 miles through a desert in 22 hours. Well, there was some walking involved during the night sections," Bob explained helpfully. "But yeah, pretty impressive, especially considering she was 67 at the time." The formal first contact ceremony was held the following week in what humans called a community center, which apparently served as a multi-purpose facility for various recreational activities. As Ambassador Krexthul delivered his prepared remarks about peaceful relations and mutual understanding, he couldn't help but notice that the walls were lined with equipment designed for what appeared to be recreational combat sports. "In the spirit of cultural exchange," he concluded, "the Krillian Empire would be honored to learn more about your recreational practices." The response was immediate and enthusiastic. Within minutes, Ambassador Krexthul found himself signed up for a beginner-friendly fitness boot camp, a weekend rock climbing expedition, and something called a fun run that apparently involved 5 kilometers of voluntary cardiovascular torture. "Don't worry," Bob assured him. "We'll start you off easy. No point in throwing you into the deep end right away." Ambassador Krexthul nodded politely, while privately wondering what humans considered the shallow end, if this was supposedly easy. The first diplomatic fitness exchange took place 3 days later. The human contingent consisted of 12 volunteers ranging in age from 19 to 73, representing what they described as a good cross-section of average fitness levels. The alien delegation included some of the Empire's finest military specimens, all of whom had been briefed extensively on human physical capabilities and warned to expect the impossible. The morning began with what the humans called dynamic warm-ups, which turned out to be a series of movements designed to activate the major muscle groups and prepare the body for activity. To the aliens, it looked suspiciously like a combat preparation ritual, complete with coordinated movements and precise timing. "Higher knees!" shouted Janet Morrison, a 57-year-old accountant who served as the group's volunteer fitness coordinator. "Come on, people. This is supposed to get your heart rate up." Commander Vex Harrell, now serving as the alien team's liaison officer, watched in fascination as Janet demonstrated a movement called butt kicks, with the kind of precise execution that would have impressed a drill sergeant. Around him, his fellow Krillians struggled to match the casual athleticism of humans who apparently considered this level of coordination to be basic preparation. The workout itself was a revelation in sustained impossibility. For 45 minutes, the humans led the alien delegation through a series of exercises that seemed designed to test every possible aspect of physical capability: strength, endurance, flexibility, coordination, balance, and something the humans called functional movement patterns. The aliens, despite their superior technology and advanced military training, found themselves consistently outpaced by humans who chatted casually throughout activities that left the visitors gasping for breath. "The trick," explained Harold Weatherby, a 68-year-old retired teacher, while demonstrating a movement that somehow combined a squat, a jump, and a push-up into a single fluid motion, "is to pace yourself. Don't try to go all out right away. Build up your endurance gradually." Harold paused to perform another flawless repetition of what he called a burpee, his grey hair barely even damp with perspiration. "I've been doing this for about 5 years now, ever since my doctor told me I needed to get more active. Started with just basic walking, but you know how it is. Once you start feeling better, you want to keep challenging yourself." Vex Harrell, who was currently experiencing what he suspected might be cardiac failure, managed a weak nod. Around him, elite Krillian soldiers were discovering that their advanced physiology was no match for the casual fitness standards of a species that had apparently evolved to find suffering enjoyable. The true horror came during what the humans called the cool-down phase, when Janet cheerfully announced that today's session had been pretty light since they were taking it easy for our new friends. Pretty light. Ambassador Krexthul, who had spent the last 20 minutes questioning his life choices and wondering if diplomatic immunity covered emergency medical evacuation, stared at the humans with a mixture of awe and terror. "Next week we'll kick it up a notch," Janet continued. "Maybe add some resistance training. Oh, and don't forget about Saturday's hiking trip. We're doing the Cascade Trail this time." The way she said Cascade Trail suggested that this was somehow different from their usual recreational mountain torture, though whether that difference represented an improvement or an escalation remained unclear. That evening, Ambassador Krexthul filed his preliminary cultural assessment report. Humans appear to have developed a society based on the systematic pursuit of voluntary physical challenge. What they term recreation would be considered advanced military conditioning by our standards. Their casual fitness levels exceed those of our elite forces. Request immediate revision of all contact protocols to account for the possibility that this entire species may be composed of unwitting super soldiers. The response from High Command was swift and decisive. Maintain diplomatic relations, study their methods, learn everything. The learning process proved to be both enlightening and traumatic. Over the following months, the alien diplomatic team was systematically introduced to the full spectrum of human recreational impossibility. Rock climbing, martial arts, dance classes, team sports, individual endurance challenges, and something called adventure racing that appeared to combine multiple forms of punishment into a single, comprehensive ordeal. Each new activity revealed another layer of casual human capability. The rock climbing expedition demonstrated that humans could apparently defy gravity as a hobby. They scaled vertical cliff faces using nothing but their fingers and toes, chatting casually about weekend plans while dangling hundreds of feet above the ground. "The key is learning to trust your equipment," explained climbing instructor Patricia Valdez, while hanging upside down from what appeared to be an impossible handhold. "And, of course, building up your grip strength and core stability. Most people think climbing is all about arm strength, but it's really more about technique and mental focus." Ambassador Krexthul watched from what he considered a safe distance as Patricia demonstrated a move that involved somehow transitioning from hanging by her fingertips to standing on a ledge the width of a coin, all while maintaining a conversation about proper climbing etiquette. "Now, who wants to give it a try?" she called down cheerfully. The martial arts classes showed that they had weaponized their own bodies and turned the resulting combat systems into art forms. The dance classes proved that they could achieve precise physical coordination while maintaining social interaction and somehow making it look effortless. But it was the adventure race that truly broke the alien observer's understanding of human normalcy. So basically, explained race coordinator Michelle Santos, a 34-year-old nurse who organized adventure races in her spare time. Teams navigate through 40 miles of varied terrain using only a map and compass, complete physical challenges at designated checkpoints, and try to reach the finish line in under 8 hours. Ambassador Krexthul processed this information slowly. 40 miles of varied terrain in under 8 hours with physical challenges. Right? It's super fun. This year we've got kayaking, rope climbing, obstacle courses, trail running, and a really cool puzzle-solving challenge that requires teams to work together under time pressure. And people volunteer for this? Oh yeah, we usually have a waiting list. People love the challenge. There's something really satisfying about pushing yourself to your limits and discovering what you're capable of. Plus, the team-building aspect is amazing. The race itself was a masterclass in sustained human impossibility. Ambassador Krexthul and his team followed the competitors in a hover vehicle, observing as teams of ordinary humans navigated through forests, climbed over obstacles, paddled across lakes, and solved complex problems while maintaining a pace that would have challenged a military pursuit unit. The winning team completed the course in 7 hours and 23 minutes, finishing with enough energy to immediately begin planning their next adventure race participation. "That was amazing!" shouted team captain Derek Peterson, a software engineer who had just spent 7 hours voluntarily subjecting himself to comprehensive physical and mental challenges. "When's the next one? We've got to try that new obstacle course design you were talking about." His teammates, a group that included a kindergarten teacher, a dental hygienist, and a retired firefighter, were already discussing strategy improvements and training modifications for future events. Ambassador Krexthul stared at the celebrating humans and realized that his species had fundamentally misunderstood the nature of the universe. They had assumed that advanced civilizations would naturally trend toward comfort and ease, that technological progress would eliminate the need for physical challenge. Humans had achieved exactly the opposite. They had created a technological society so advanced that survival no longer required significant physical effort, and they had responded by deliberately reintroducing challenge as a form of entertainment. They had weaponized their own leisure time. But the most disturbing revelation came during a casual conversation with Eleanor Fitzpatrick, the 82-year-old ultramarathon veteran who had become something of a legend among the alien observers. "You know what I love most about all this?" she said, settling into a chair after completing what she described as a light 10-mile training run. "It's not really about the physical challenge, though that's certainly part of it." "What do you mean?" Ambassador Krexthul asked, genuinely curious despite his growing sense of existential dread. "Well, when you push yourself physically, you learn things about yourself that you can't learn any other way. You discover reserves of strength and determination that you didn't know you had. And once you know those reserves exist, you can apply that knowledge to every other area of your life." She paused to take a sip of water, completely unfazed by the fact that she had just articulated a philosophy that would revolutionize military training throughout the galaxy. "Plus," she continued with a mischievous grin, "it's just really fun to surprise people. You should see the looks I get when I tell people about my hobby. They can't believe someone my age could do these things. But age is just a number, you know. It's what you do with your time that matters." Ambassador Krexthul nodded slowly, beginning to understand that humans had accidentally discovered something that his species had been searching for throughout their entire civilization, the secret to maintaining warrior spirit in peacetime. The final diplomatic report submitted by Ambassador Krexthul was a document that would become required reading at the Galactic Diplomatic Academy for the next 3 centuries. Humanity represents a fundamental paradigm shift in our understanding of advanced species development. They have achieved a level of casual physical capability that suggests evolutionary adaptation to continuous challenge. Their recreational activities routinely exceed the training standards of our military forces. Most concerning, they appear to be completely unaware that their normal lifestyle would be considered superhuman by galactic standards. They have created a society that accidentally produces warriors through entertainment. Recommend immediate establishment of formal alliance and exchange programs. Also recommend comprehensive physical fitness upgrades for all diplomatic personnel assigned to human contact missions. Also recommend updating our definition of impossible. Also recommend psychological counseling for all personnel who have experienced human fun runs. The Alliance Treaty was signed 6 months later in a ceremony that somehow involved a charity triathlon. Ambassador Krextul finished in the middle of the pack and was promptly invited to join the local triathlon training group. He accepted, because by that point he had realized that refusing would probably be considered diplomatically insulting, and possibly because he was starting to understand the addictive nature of voluntary challenge that seemed to define human existence. The treaty marked the beginning of what historians would later call the human fitness revolution in galactic society. Within a decade, alien species throughout the galaxy had adopted modified versions of human recreational practices, leading to unprecedented improvements in overall health, mental resilience, and combat readiness. The irony was not lost on anyone. Humanity had accidentally created a galactic fitness empire while thinking they were just having fun on weekends. Commander Vex Harral, now serving as the Empire's Director of Human Cultural Studies, often reflected on how spectacularly wrong their initial assessment had been. They had sent their finest warrior to evaluate human military capabilities, and he had discovered that humans had somehow made military-level training into a casual hobby. But perhaps the most disturbing realization came during his final report to the Galactic Council. We have spent millennia developing advanced military technologies and training programs designed to create superior warriors. Humans achieved the same result by accident, through what they call having a good time. They don't train for war, they train for joy. And somehow, that makes them more formidable than any army we've ever faced. But the Council had received this information in stunned silence. Finally, Councillor Threxnell had asked the question that was on everyone's mind. What happens if they ever decide to stop having fun and start taking things seriously? Vex Harral had considered this carefully before responding. I honestly don't think we want to find out. 2 years after first contact, the human fitness revolution had spread so thoroughly that the Galactic Olympics had to be restructured to account for the casual impossibility of human athletic standards. What humans considered recreational club-level performance was setting galactic records. The situation reached its logical conclusion when the Galactic Defense Force formally requested human assistance in training their elite units. The irony was perfect. The species they had originally intended to assess as a potential threat was now being asked to help train the galaxy's finest warriors. The first Galactic Defense Force training exchange took place on a human military base, where General Patricia Kowalski, Mildred's younger sister and a career military officer, greeted the alien delegation. "Welcome to Fort Braxton," she announced with the same terrifying cheerfulness that seemed to run in the Kowalski family. "We're excited to show you how we do things here. Now, I understand you folks are interested in our training methods." Commander Fissa Andra, now serving as the Galactic Defense Force liaison officer, nodded carefully. "We are curious about your approach to physical conditioning." "Excellent. We'll start with basic morning PT. Nothing too intense, just a little cardiovascular work to get the blood flowing. The basic morning PT turned out to be a 5-mile run, followed by an hour of calisthenics that left the alien delegation questioning their life choices and the fundamental laws of physics. "Come on, people!" General Kowalski shouted, while demonstrating perfect form on her 50th push-up. "My grandmother could do better than this, and she's been dead for 15 years. The alien warriors, who had conquered star systems and faced down impossible odds, found themselves utterly demoralized by a human general who was simultaneously insulting them and their deceased relatives, while outperforming them in every conceivable physical metric. But it was during the tactical training exercises that the aliens truly understood what they were dealing with. Human military doctrine, it turned out, was based on the same principle that governed their recreational activities. The assumption that impossible things were merely difficult things that required proper preparation. "The key to effective military strategy," explained Colonel Derek Ramirez during a simulated combat exercise, "is adaptability. You can't just rely on superior technology or overwhelming force. You have to be able to think on your feet, adjust to changing circumstances, and make the best use of whatever resources you have available." He paused to demonstrate a tactical maneuver that involved using the terrain itself as a weapon, turning what appeared to be a disadvantageous position into a strategic advantage through pure creative thinking. In combat, nothing ever goes according to plan, so you have to train your mind and body to handle the unexpected. That's why our training focuses on problem-solving under pressure, physical conditioning that goes beyond normal limits, and mental resilience that can withstand any challenge. The alien observers watched in fascination as human soldiers performed tasks that required not just physical capability, but creative thinking, teamwork, and the kind of mental flexibility that could only come from a lifetime of voluntarily subjecting oneself to impossible challenges. "But here's the thing," Colonel Ramirez continued. "We don't just train for war, we train for peace, because a warrior who only knows how to fight isn't really a warrior at all. A true warrior knows when to fight, when to negotiate, when to protect, and when to show mercy." The philosophical implications of this statement would occupy alien military theorists for decades. Humans had somehow created a warrior culture that emphasized restraint, creativity, and moral judgment rather than simple aggression and obedience. The training exchange concluded with what the humans called a friendly competition between the alien forces and a group of human soldiers. The aliens, despite their advanced technology and supposedly superior physiology, were systematically outperformed in every category: endurance, strength, tactical thinking, teamwork, and something the humans called esprit de corps. "Don't feel bad," consoled Sergeant Jennifer Walsh after the aliens had conceded defeat in the final challenge. "It takes years to develop this kind of conditioning. We've been doing this stuff since we were kids." The phrase, "since we were kids," hung in the air like a revelation. The aliens suddenly realized that human physical and mental conditioning wasn't just a military training program or a recreational hobby. It was a fundamental part of their culture that began in childhood and continued throughout their entire lives. Human children, it turned out, were systematically exposed to physical challenges, competitive activities, and problem-solving exercises from an early age. What other species considered advanced military training, humans considered elementary school physical education. And the final piece of the puzzle fell into place when Vexa Haral attended something called a Little League baseball game and watched 8-year-old humans demonstrate tactical thinking, hand-eye coordination, and competitive spirit that would have impressed seasoned military strategists. "Strike 3, you're out," called the umpire, a volunteer father who was treating the children's game with the same seriousness that a Krillian general might bring to a battle briefing. Vex Harrell watched as the young human who had just failed to hit the ball walked back to his team's bench with obvious disappointment, but no trace of the kind of devastating psychological collapse that failure typically produced in alien military training. "Good try, Tommy," called his coach, another volunteer parent. "Remember what we practiced about keeping your eye on the ball. You'll get it next time." The child nodded, already analyzing his mistake and preparing for his next opportunity. This casual resilience in the face of failure, Vex Harrell realized, was perhaps the most terrifying thing about humans. They had created a culture that taught children to treat failure as a learning opportunity rather than a catastrophe. They were systematically producing a species of beings who were physically capable, mentally resilient, and emotionally prepared for any challenge the universe might present. And they thought it was just good, wholesome fun. 3 months later, the Galactic Council formally voted to establish the Human Cultural Exchange Program with the stated goal of learning from human recreational and educational practices. The unstated goal was to figure out how to produce warriors who were as casually effective as human civilians. The program was a massive success, leading to improvements in military effectiveness, civilian health, and general quality of life throughout the galaxy. It also led to the establishment of the Galactic Fitness Championships, where humans consistently dominated every category while insisting that they were just having fun and not really taking it seriously. The final irony came when the first human delegation visited Krylos, the Krillian homeworld, for a cultural exchange. The aliens had prepared their finest military demonstrations, showcasing centuries of warrior tradition and advanced combat techniques. The humans had responded by organizing a community softball tournament and inviting the entire Krillian military to participate. "It'll be fun," insisted Captain Barbara Chen, the human delegation leader and a former CrossFit instructor turned diplomatic attaché. "We'll teach you the rules, and then we can have a friendly game. Nothing competitive, just a chance to get some exercise and get to know each other." The Krillian military, composed of warriors who had conquered half the galaxy, found themselves learning the rules of a human children's game from a woman who could apparently throw a ball with the accuracy of a guided missile and catch anything that came within 10 feet of her. The game itself was a masterpiece of casual humiliation. The humans, while patiently explaining the rules and offering encouragement, systematically outperformed the alien warriors in every aspect of what they insisted was just a fun recreational activity. "Nice swing," Barbara called to General Krexnuth after he missed the ball entirely for the 4th consecutive time. "You're getting closer. Remember to keep your eye on the ball and rotate your hips. It's all about the follow-through." By the 9th inning, the Krillian military had been forced to confront the devastating reality that their elite warriors were being outclassed by humans who were treating the entire experience as a pleasant social gathering. The final score was irrelevant. What mattered was the casual confidence with which the humans had approached the challenge, the effortless way they had adapted their playing style to accommodate their alien opponents, and the genuine enthusiasm they had shown for sharing their recreational activity with new friends. Commander Vex Harrell, now serving as the official Krillian liaison to the Human Cultural Exchange Program, filed his final report that evening. "After extensive observation and participation in human recreational activities, I have reached the following conclusion. We have spent our entire civilization trying to create the perfect warrior through discipline, technology, and training. Humans created the perfect warrior by accident through play, creativity, and joy. They don't train for battle. They train for life. And somehow that preparation makes them ready for anything the universe might throw at them." He paused to consider his next words carefully. "Recommendation: immediate implementation of human recreational practices throughout the Empire. Also recommendation: never under any circumstances ask humans what they consider serious competition. I have seen their fun runs and their friendly games. I do not wish to discover what they are capable of when they are actually trying to win." The report was classified at the highest levels of galactic security, not because it contained military secrets, but because the Galactic Council was terrified that other species might discover just how casually superior humans were at essentially everything. 5 years after first contact, humanity had accidentally become the unofficial fitness instructors for half the galaxy, the go-to species for military training consultation, and the undisputed champions of competitive activities they had invented as children's games. And they still had no idea why everyone else found them so impressive. "It's weird," mused Mildred Kowalski during a yoga class that now included participants from 12 different star systems. "All these aliens keep acting like we're doing something special, but we're just trying to stay healthy and have a good time." She adjusted the posture of a Rigelian diplomat who was struggling with what humans called warrior pose, completely unaware that her casual correction had just taught an advanced combat stance to a being whose species had been perfecting martial arts for millennia. "Remember to breathe," she called to the class. "This should feel challenging, but not impossible. If you're not having at least a little fun, you're probably taking it too seriously." Commander Vex Haral, who was currently discovering that humans had somehow made standing still into an athletic challenge, reflected on the cosmic joke that had brought him to this moment. He had been sent to assess humanity's military potential and had instead discovered that they had weaponized wellness, militarized fun, and turned personal improvement into a form of recreational warfare. The real question, he realized, wasn't whether humans were dangerous. The question was whether the rest of the galaxy was prepared for a species that had made being dangerous look this much like having a good time. But perhaps the most terrifying realization of all was still to come. It happened during the first Galactic Peace Summit, when humanity's representative, a former marathon runner turned ambassador named Patricia Williams, casually mentioned that all of the impressive physical activities the aliens had been observing represented what humans considered baseline fitness for a healthy lifestyle. "Oh, this is nothing," she said cheerfully, when complimented on her performance during the traditional diplomatic obstacle course. "You should see what our serious athletes can do, or our military special forces, or honestly, just about anyone who's really dedicated to their sport." The silence that greeted this statement was the kind of silence that accompanies the realization that you have been fundamentally wrong about the nature of reality. This is your baseline?" asked Ambassador Krexthul, his voice barely above a whisper. "Pretty much. I mean, I try to stay in shape, but I'm really just a casual fitness enthusiast, nothing special." And that was when the assembled representatives of 47 galactic civilizations realized that humanity had not yet shown them what they were truly capable of. Everything they had witnessed, all the casual impossibilities and recreational impossibilities, represented the lower end of human capability. The upper end remained a mystery that none of them were entirely sure they wanted to solve, but they were about to find out anyway, because humans, it turned out, were just getting started.